In the same way that men learn to be leg men or breast men, or to prefer blondes or brunettes, some men learn to prefer corpses, children, or the suffering of another sexually. The mystery of how that happens is not entirely solved, but the fact that it happens is shown by such facts as these. In the UK, there have been a sufficient number of gas mask fetishists and Macintosh fetishists that there are pornographic magazines devoted specifically to those interests, and clubs through which such people can meet. Those do not occur in the United States because our raincoats are made of different material, and we've never had a time when all the women were wearing gas masks. In Israel, someday there will be gas mask fetishists because they did have such a historical exposure. It's not imaginable that there is such a thing as a gas mask fetish gene, or that there is a latex brain lesion, or that there is a Macintosh hormone. So it can't be something we've evolved as an abnormality biologically. The human must be capable, or at least some humans, of learning aberrant sexual responses.
The gap between fantasies of murder and murder itself is large. A potential killer uses facilitators, which decrease the distance and blur the division between fantasy and reality. Pornography, drugs, alcohol.
In order to get over his own inhibitions against doing these distasteful, disgusting things, he would drink himself to a state of intoxication every time. He could only kill if he were drunk. He could only dismember if he were drunk.
And if we could liken this to, say, people in the Nazi death camps in Treblinka and Dachau and Birkenau, the actual men who were doing the killings, the death squads, they were given huge amounts of alcohol. They were always drinking in order to allow them to do it. They couldn't go out and just on their own and kill these people. They were constantly receiving alcohol. I think that alcohol takes away our inhibitions. But on that same note, by taking away our inhibitions, if I take away your inhibitions, that's not going to increase your capacity unless it's already there. I mean, you have to have the capacity to do it. And so what the alcohol does, it decreases our inhibitions and allows us to do what we've already prepared ourselves to do.
By the summer of 1978, Dahmer's parents split up and caused Jeffrey another terrible trauma. Jeffrey's mother was granted custody in the divorce proceedings, but she left, taking only Jeffrey's younger brother. He felt utterly rejected. This was the summer of his graduation.
The evening of the prom dance, it was kind of in a way, a disaster. First of all, he was pretty late, and he's rushing around, and he come to the door, and my father hated all boys. So here he is, and my father's at the door, like looking like a bulldog, growling, and just trying to, you know, hurry up and get out of there, but we got to be polite and talk. We didn't want to take pictures. My mother made us take pictures. The parents, that's the kind of guy you bring home. To the girls back then, the guys had longer hair, was in style, wire frame glasses, not the way Jeff looked.
At some point, if the potential offender does not find a way to vent themselves without killing, they're going to go out and actualize those fantasies, and they're going to practice it. They're going to go out and harm somebody. And by the time they get to that point, it's a very small step from the actual violent fantasy to the actual killing.
To me, it seems like he changed a lot after school because he did this. But when you really think about it, in reality, he didn't change a bit because he murdered his first victim when he was 18, like I think 3 weeks after the prom. So what he was is the same person, just putting a big disguise on.
Violent fantasies combined with the use of facilitators drive an individual to the very brink. What then is the trigger which finally propels him into murder? For some, it's an event which makes them angry. For others, simply an opportunity.
At one point, Dahmer's parents were out of town. Dahmer was driving the family car down a road nearby his home, and a 16-year-old young male, bare-chested, good-looking, narrow waist. The circumstances of his fantasy weren't before him. Dahmer picked him up, offered to bring him back to the house, entertained them for an evening, drank some beer, talked around, lifted weights. And Dahmer was in ecstasy that his fantasy had come true until the bubble burst. And the bubble burst when this young man said, well, thank you for the entertainment. I must get on. I have to hitchhike again. I have to get back on the road. I have to be down south in several hours. And Dahmer became terrified. He became panicked that his fantasy was over before it had started. And as the young man bent over to pick up his jacket, Dahmer crashed a weight bar down onto his head and murdered him. Dahmer said very matter-of-factly, had he not seen that young man that night, at that time, when the parents were out of town, that the entire 17 homicides may never have occurred. Now, again, if that's reality, I don't know, but this is what the Dahmer had told me.
Dahmer masturbated over the corpse, then dragged it to the crawl space under his parents' house. He dismembered the corpse and performed sexual acts with parts of the body. 3 days later, he buried the remains in the garden.
So nothing's really been normal ever since then. Taints your whole life. You know, I didn't think it would, but it does. It taints your whole life. And I thought that I'd just try to live as normally as possible and just bury it, you know, the memory of it and everything. But things like that don't stay buried forever. But like a festering sore, it doesn't get better. It just gets worse until finally it ruptures.
Jeffrey Dahmer experienced tremendous excitement at having performed the act about which he'd fantasized for so many years. But afterwards he was appalled. The killing was a new self-induced trauma, which served only to intensify his low self-esteem and isolation. That made fantasies of dominance and control start all over again. He tried to suppress these feelings.
I think his drinking, the out-of-control drinking, the alcohol abuse, was an attempt to numb himself and to drug himself out of reality. And he would use sexually explicit material as a release to try and control his fantasies and the behavior.
Jeffrey Dahmer used pornography to try and control his impulses. But some serial killers are stimulated by material which few would find pornographic.
I think it is undoubtedly true that serial killers look for literature and imagery which they can find stimulating, but very often that is far removed from what we conventionally call pornography. The single book which has probably had the greatest impact on stimulating serial killers, or which they have used to justify their crimes, has undoubtedly been the Christian Bible, and especially the Book of Revelation, the imagery of which has an enormous appeal, especially to paranoid schizophrenics. Peter Sutcliffe made use of the imagery of the Book of Revelation in his defense, and this has been widely used. Clearly the Book of Revelation is not pornography, but as I say, it has certainly had a great deal more discernible effect on serial killers than any kind of sadistic or hardcore pornography.